The RAF Coastal Command was formed in 1936 prior to the war, and it was to protect the British shipping, British Isles from enemies around the world. It didn't receive the publicity that Bomber Command and Fighter Command got during the war, because it was tactics to keep secret. They couldn't allow the boats timing and trips to get into the enemy hands. So it was a defensive as well as an offensive course that played a major role in World War II. Attacking enemy shipping, of course, was done by a single-engined aircraft in the main from coastal aerodromes, and the mine laying in enemy ports and shipping lanes, that's obvious. Photo reconnaissance, that was quite an important role, particularly photographing all the ports to find what shipping is there, and also for the progress of the army on coastal jobs. Air sea rescue, they rescued thousands of personnel during the war. So many went down in the channel. Hunting enemy U-boats, that was my area, and protecting Atlantic convoys. Battle of the Atlantic was the main thoroughfare for between America and England, which was so necessary to keep the war going by getting the goods and armaments across the Atlantic. So there were quite big convoys. You can see that map there, see the map there, and the aircraft we had at the beginning of the war couldn't cover that Atlantic gap. They didn't have the range, or if they could get there, they couldn't stop there and do anything. So it was a matter of obtaining aircraft and modifying them so that they could get a long range. Also, that map there shows earlier planes were based. That was in Cornwall, so that you could service there, and the Bay of Biscay, in Gibraltar, the Azores, Newfoundland, and Reykjavik in Iceland. Yes, I was involved with the Liberator, which was modified with two very large fuel tanks of 600 gallons each, put into half the Bombay. We could then cross the Atlantic. We could go out into that Atlantic gap there and afford to patrol with the convoy for at least 3 or 4 hours. So you had the convoys being guarded by the American side, by the Canadian Air Force. We could go either way, which means that the convoy was travelling west. We could perhaps patrol there going with the convoy, so we had a less distance to go and we could go right across. The convoy itself could have, say, up to 100 ships, and they were different speed, and of course the convoys are always at the slower speed, so the fast ships didn't want to go along at the speed of the ship. So they were divided up into an 8-knot convoy or a 10-knot convoy. The map showing there is the red ones are the Royal Navy or the Canadian Navy, both were there. And you'd have a naval officer in charge who is generally on the destroyer, and he could send those corvettes or a similar smaller boat out to contacts which we were flying around at 2,000 feet. You have course, 4 or 5 times the vision, our own vision, and also with radar vision that the corvettes could have. But we couldn't do anything if the submarine was under the water. But with their equipment they could. So the aircraft would contact the submarine they might have found, and if it died below the water, well then the Navy came in and got rid of it.
Bruce, how did you make contact with the convoy? You flew out from Cornwall or Northern Ireland, and then you had to establish contact with possibly the destroyer there, so that he wouldn't shoot you down. So what did you do?
Yes, that's always a problem, but not so much in the mid-Atlantic, that there's not so other aircraft. We'd have to identify ourselves with the signal of the day, which was various colours in a certain order. And we would fire off a very pistol as we were approaching the convoy. They would reply with the correct one, hopefully. If we didn't send our signal and be identified, we'd be shot down before we got too close to the convoy.
Following on from that, I said to Bruce during the week, how did you identify the submarines? How did you identify whether they're friendly or not? And he said they were so well organised that they only ever sent us to where there were enemy submarines. So if we saw one, we hit it. No questions asked. Bruce, how long could you stay on station over a convoy?
Well, that naturally would depend on where the convoy was situated when we met it, and which way it was going. If it was going away from us, of course, we couldn't spend so much time. But normally we'd try for at least 3 hours as a minimum, but 4 or 5 hours if we could. Then another plane from the squadron would take over. It was a matter of keeping a complete daylight coverage of the convoy, because the main thing was to stop the German submarines coming to the surface in the daytime and getting a fix on the convoy and where it was going, and they get a number of subs from the area together to make an attack at night, and generally they sunk 1 or 2 or more ships in the night when they were in that area.
Bruce told me that in the last quarter of 1942 the Japanese submarines accounted for 1.6 million tonnes of shipping. That's a huge amount to go to the bottom of the ocean. And not to forget the efforts of the merchant navy as well who were involved. Bruce, how did you navigate in those early days over the convoys, or to and from there?
Yes, to and from was the problem. Of course, the weather in over the Atlantic is not the best, and we had to navigate by the sun and the stars and working out drifts, because there was, as I said before, complete radio silence, because the shipping was located by the amount of traffic on the air that each side would look for.
And what sort of crew did you have, and what were their jobs in the air?
We had a crew of 10, at least 2 pilots, 2 navigators, and 4 air gunners, radar operator, and they were a mixed crew. There's the crew I had when I was considerably younger, and by the uniforms you'll note different colours there. We had quite a mix of countries. There's a Canadian there, an RAF officer, an RAF crew, having all been through the Empire Air Training Scheme, it was very easy to get a crew to work together, having had the same training, wireless operators and bombers, bombers, and the navigators.
Could you tell us something about the other operations apart from in the Mid-Atlantic Gap as to what you're involved in?
So the other major way of keeping an eye on and getting rid of some of those submarines was to climb from the line from Spain to Land's End. If the RAF kept a continuous line of aircraft patrolling there, all the subs in the at some time had to go through and come back that line because after France capitulated, then Germany had all those French ports. England was only at the shortest there about 20 miles from London.
What sort of height were you at when you were on patrol?
But again, this depended on weather because it can be bad in England. And but 2,000 would have been handy to get good vision and below the clouds.
Okay, now for the tricky bit. What would you do when you came across a submarine?
Two options. We could go and attack it, advise the senior naval officer. This is if the sub's around a convoy. The options depended on what you had in your armament on the plane that day in the bomb bay. Depth charges dependent on generally electronics and new equipment coming through. So the armament you had at the beginning of the war was only bombs. Later on we had the depth charges that could be set at different depths. And at the top of the range, that only came in 1943, was the Mark 45, and that was a homing torpedo. And that also worked. And the other one was the sonar buoys. But the homing torpedo depended on the sub being below the surface and going flat out to attract the guiding missile as it was. I'll briefly relate one convoy patrol. It was on March 14th, 1943. When the radar sighted a German submarine on the surface about 20 miles ahead of a convoy. The submarine was waiting over the horizon for the convoy. It was dusk and was probably waiting to attack ships in the coming darkness. Our initial sighting was a contact on our radar screen, but after a few minutes we had a visual sight. The submarine apparently did not see us as it remained on the surface. We had new secret Mark 24 homing torpedoes in the bomb bay for the first time, as well as 4 depth charges. I wanted to try out the new torpedoes, so we prepared one and started our approach from about 2 miles stern and dropped down to 200 feet. The sub remained on the surface. We did not drop the then secret homing torpedo, while the sub was surfaced, for 2 reasons. We had strict instructions not to drop the homing torpedo if it could be seen by the submarine, as it would be reported to the German headquarters. It was hoped the Mark 24 weapon would be kept secret for as long as possible. And 2, the homing device would not operate unless the sub was being driven by its fast-moving propeller. Therefore, we kept on the course, hoping it would dive, but it didn't. So we went, there were no crew, submarine crew on the surface manning guns, which was a certain deterrent. So we flew over it, and hoping it would dive, and it did. And so ours was a dummy run, and some thought that we'd messed it up, and he promptly got on with his dive. So we went straight past, climbed up, came to about 1,000 feet, and watched him go down. And doing so, he left a swirl showing the position he'd dived. All went according to plan. So we circled again and waiting for him to get going under the surface. Came in and dropped this new secret weapon. After a few minutes, there was a hump on the surface, which is often a sign of the explosion, which means it must have hit. And it was followed by an oil slick floating ahead of it, diving position about half a mile. So we thought that was successful. But it's very difficult to get something past the RN. They won't accept that a submarine has been split open unless they have a body or something positive. We circled for about another 20 minutes. No more evidence other than that. So we signalled the Navy, and they were able to alter course because of there's one there. There could be others being called up earlier to join him. And often they were in packs, the U-boats. But by notifying the convoy, they were about 20 miles behind us. They'd changed course, so that night they were going in a much different direction to the daytime one, which this submarine had obviously got a fix and track on this convoy. So there were probably 50 ships there waiting to be struck at night by the submarines that were in that area. Then we'd finished our day's work and set course for home, which was about in Northern Ireland, about 4 hours away. Getting home, we had a debriefing, as is usual, by the intelligence officer and the station officer, commander. Gave him what we thought was a good effort, and he said yes, and that was classified as a possible sinking. Possible being the word, and that ended another op strip of 16.5 hours flying, and about 3 hours beforehand, and briefing and the debriefing afterwards was a pretty long day's work. It was 20 years later that I heard from a friend that a book he read stated not only that the plane I was flying had actually sunk a submarine, U-boat 266, but also the book named the captain of the sub that was sunk, a list of Allied British ships that he had sunk prior to our successful attack. So that was a very happy ending for us, but I'd say it took 20 years. those records had come from the German records that were examined after the war. That attack marked my last of 5 previous attacks I'd had. Shortly after, we were stationed, moved our station from Northern Ireland to Reykjavik in Iceland, but that's another time. Thank you. Radar was the biggest progressed instrumentation, and at the beginning of the war, the aerial, which I was going to show on the Liberator, it was necessary to have 4-foot lengths of aerial on a big frame, which were carried on the back of the plane and also under the wings. But the English changed the centimetre length of the radar, so it was not necessary to carry this on the exterior on the plane, and streamlined it. The radar and the sonar, at the end of the war, we could pick up a submarine below the surface, send that message to a buoy on the surface, and that in turn would relay it to the plane above. So that was the first time they were able to take a reading on a sub below the surface onto the plane, which was a real break.
When you were engaging the submarine, how did you communicate with the convoy or the destroyer without revealing the presence of the convoy?
Yeah, we were always using Morse code on the Morse code orders. Yeah. It was a bit of awkward flying past at 200 miles an hour and the boat going at 8. I've seen the signaller on the bridge of a boat going with his running around, getting all tied up with the leads around the bottom. Actually, there were more killed on operations with Coastal Command than with fighter aircraft.
If my memory serves me correctly, in one of the books that Bruce loaned me during the week, there were 2,900 aircraft lost in Coastal Command or fighting submarines, and over 9,000 personnel were killed.
What was the number of depth charges that you carried on the Liberator?
Well, probably 10, but there were different weight of death charges. There's a 500 pounder, and the last one I was talking about was only 100 with that detonating on the actual submarine. There were also rockets carried, and those rockets were about 4 inches diameter, go through one side of the submarine and come out the other.